Yeah, comrades, brothers, ladies and gentlemen, and sisters with us, greetings and welcome to our Pan-African Reading Club. What we do always is to review some of the books, progressive books, and I've been trying to review the book entitled Defeating Dictators by Dr. George Aiti. We are actually in chapter 4, and in chapter 4, we are looking at modus operandi, so how dictators operate. And just in our last reading, we were looking at issues to do with the, what we call the let me just remember that it was on the support base of the dictators, and probably that's where I want to start from. So let's first of all appreciate and recognize the presence of all of you joining us from Namibia, from South Africa, from Zimbabwe, and I'm here in Kenya, and I believe more other comrades will be joining us as we move along. So once again, feel most welcome, and yeah, welcome to what you do. What we always do is we read the books, especially some paragraphs of the book, and then we share what do we think, because this is like a manual on how do we defeat dictators. And you know, dictators are so many in the continent. So probably, Sister Tapua, do you think that, is it right with you that we just read the previous reading, just read it, even if it can take us maybe 5 minutes or 10? Then now we go to our reading today that will start from that other capture of the state systems, so that maybe members will be able to know also where we've come from and probably join us as we contribute to the next chapters. How do you think, Sister Tapua?
That's a great idea. I think then we can all be on the same page.
Okay, now, is there anybody willing to read for us from the support base? I'll be moving the screen as you read. If nobody, probably I'll ask Sister Tapua to do so. But is there anybody within the crowd here who would like to read for us what I'm sharing the screen? And I believe you see it.
Yeah, I'm able to read if there's no one else willing to read.
Okay, Sister Tapua, go ahead.
Okay. I'm missing the title of this section. I will have to start with number 1, but I need the introductory sentence to number 1. If you could scroll down a bit, please. Oh, all right.
Just start with the support base. Remember, number 1 was in the previous reading.
All right, the support base. To advance their vision and maintain social control, despots must find ways of constructing alliances to carry out their decisions, to extract resources, and to maintain their support base. In general, they rely on patron-client and patron-patron relationships. Sycophants may be employed as clients to sing praises and execute the diktats of the strong men. Hatchet men and ruthless thugs are hired to carry out dastardly deeds such as eliminating a political rival or dissident. For a more worthy goal, however, a direct appeal to the populace may be made. For example, to garner support for the struggle for independence, the nationalists promised to distribute the benefits of independence: free education, healthcare, affordable housing, and jobs to the people. Strongmen may also court the support of local leaders, such as chiefs and market traders, with promises of personal gain, public office, or local development. Solidarity ties, such as ethnicity, religion, or racial groups, are exploited to secure support. Despots channel resources and funds to members of a particular group in exchange for the group's support and loyalty. Thus, one finds despots surrounding themselves with such kinsmen who are placed in key positions in ministries and government posts, not on the basis of qualification or merit, but for reasons of political loyalty and tribal solidarity. In Saddam Hussein's Iraq, the Sunni are the favored ones. When people are employed or promoted, not because of merit, but for political or ethnic reasons, efficiency suffers, professionalism declines, and government institutions become dysfunctional. The despot makes every effort to co-opt leaders of important organizations such as the Trade Union Congress, the Teachers Association, Students' Union, and other ethnic groups to expand his support base. Oh, the screen is moved. Can you show me where I am? The screen is moving. Hi, the screen is moved. Where am I? Okay, right. Thank you. The result is a grand coalition of interest, religious and ethnic groups competing for access to the despot and for scarce resources from the state. The despot may play one group against another in order to maintain control. He may also cruelly punish a disloyal group in order to keep the others in line. Like Saddam Hussein, during his dictatorial reign, Gaddafi has cunningly played the tribal game. He offered economic privileges to tribes loyal to him. His own Gaddafi tribe and the Wafala and Tahuna tribes around Tripoli and the western part of the country. Less favored were the Zawiya and Zentan and the Obeidat tribes. Can we scroll down a bit, please? Yes, thank you. A despot is always looking for political support to accord him some legitimacy. He may hijack the dominant party in the country by clever design or chicanery, then subvert the constitution of this party to achieve his vision, which in most cases amounts to self-aggrandizement. Cronies or allies are placed in the key positions of the party to ensure that the despot is always nominated as the party's presidential candidate. Where a dominant party does not exist, either because all political parties have been banned or because the dominant party refuses to be taken over, a new political party or movement may be created, especially by military despots. Such a movement may be founded on some lofty idea, such as national redemption, reconciliation, and justice. The youth, especially university students, are recruited for such movements, which are later turned into political parties. The support base is maintained by dispensing patronage or other spoils of power. Spoils, also used to buy political support, come in a variety of forms. Strongmen reward their followers with access to state resources, scholarships, job for the boys in the civil service, government boards, and public cooperation. But the boys become unproductive charges for the state, and the state bureaucracy becomes bloated with redundant stuff. Soldiers can be bought with pay increases, subsidized housing, commodities, and faster promotion. State workers may be provided with subsidized housing and subsidized transportation. Some despots may provide clients with opportunities for illegal gain from public office. Corruption, accepting or extorting bribes for decisions or actions taken in a public capacity, is one such opportunity. Others include public property theft, appropriation of public revenue, fraud, and nepotism. Strongmen also reward their clients by granting special privileges. For example, they may grant preferential access to resources subject to government regulation, such as favorable allocation of import or other licenses and tax waivers. As political scientist Richard Sandbrook notes, all these allocations of non-governmental benefits can become counters in the game of factional maneuver. Essentially, the model of governance is based on the monopolization of political power by one individual or group and the dispensation of patronage to cronies, loyal supporters, and tribesmen. This support base provides the legitimacy the despot craves. The result of this political machine, sometimes called clientelism, is that politics is viewed as extractive. The state sector is seen as a source of wealth from which the favored extract as much as possible. This support base should never be underestimated or discounted for two reasons. First, the fiercest resistance to calls for change or reform is likely to come from this support base, as it benefits from the rotten status quo. It stands to lose patronage, privileges, perks, and wealth if the despot is replaced. Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe was willing to pack up and go into exile when he lost the March 2008 election. But the military chiefs, fearful of losing their perks and ill-gotten wealth, forced him to stay on, thus making him a hostage president. Obviously, opposition groups or freedom activists need to devise strategies of neutralizing the resistance from the support base. Second, no matter how despicable and unpopular a despot might be, he still has his support base. It may be 30%, meaning that the overwhelming majority of the people are fed up with him. But if 7 opposition parties challenge him in an election, they divide the opposition vote amongst themselves. If each wins 10%, none will be able to unseat the despot. Regardless, the cessation of patronage to buy political support has resulted in soaring government expenditure and bloated, inefficient bureaucracies that waste scarce resources. but trimming these bureaucracies as demanded by the imperatives of economic reform or structural adjustment has been anathema to the ruling elites, since it cripples their ability to maintain their political support base. Am I continuing?
Thank you, Sister Tapo. Thank you, Sister Tapo, for the reading. That's our reading for today. So please, let's share our thinking on that.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll start with a question. My challenge is, now that we know that this is what a despot does, it's done so subtly, so step by step, that it's difficult to stop it. How do we deal with despots? How do we deal with them?
You know, Sister Tapua? Hello?
Hello? No, I was saying, I've got a question. Now that we know that this is what despots do, how do we stop it, or how do we undermine them?
Oh, that's a very interesting question to all of us. Let me hear what others think and what they think also in the general comments on what you've read about despot and their tactics. Anybody want to share something? First of all, on what Sister Tapua has asked. What Sister Tapua has read first, and then maybe we can come to answer the question. Anybody within the audience who want to speak on something? Hello? We request you to share your thinking. Yes.
Maybe a little bit of, just to register that I'm part of the group, though I'm learning. To respond to to our sister's question, maybe to deal with them, no matter how difficult it may sound, is to resist that which they are giving us, whether for free or for whatever reason, is to resist their how do I call it, their offers. Although it's a little difficult, if you to resist something that which maybe would help better your life, you feel good. Maybe you are like a fool, but in the run, I think that will be the best thing to do. I wonder if I'm following. I'm trying to be part of the group.
Yeah, that's
Now, thank
great.
you, Sister, for sharing that. Thank you, and I appreciate that. But now look at this. Let's check at this support base for these despots. One, we are told in the second paragraph that solidarity ties such as ethnicity, religion, or racial group are actually exploited to secure support. So this despot then channel resources and funds to those members of those particular groups. So if it's this particular ethnic group, the development goes to your area, some water is there, something is there. If it's a religion, maybe some churches are built by the government and the rest, you see, you're given that support. So you find that once find despots surrounding themselves with such kinsmen, then you go extra mile, look at now the teachers' trade unions. They also ensure that they co-opt leaders of those important organizations like the trade unions in their government, the teachers, the student union, and the other ethnic groups to support and expand their support base. Then create the collusion of interest. So this is the support base of the despot. How do you break it?
Yeah, I could possibly give examples of lived experience here. Because I've noticed in Zimbabwe, for example, when the biggest teachers' union appeared to have been captured, teachers withdrew their membership and formed other groups. But then these groups were victimized to such an extent that members of such organizations, especially if they're pay comes from government were never paid. And they suddenly found themselves not in any school at all. And I was actually reading an example of someone who has been working for nothing because they haven't been paid for years, because they're one of the leadership of one of these rebel teachers unions that realized that the union was captured. And as ordinary citizens, we are not as organized as some of the things that I've seen with trade unions in the West, where they've got a support base from other trade unions. But dictators like this want to kill unions because they don't want unions, because unions usually are able to stand up and organize faster than they could. And then they're also more difficult to infiltrate because you have to be a member of the trade. Unless you can find somebody who's willing to be on your side, a lot of them will be supporting trade issues. So it's a tricky one.
But Sister Tapua, again, look at it. Those organized movements are the best way to actually do a revolt, because at least they are organized. They have leadership, whether the transport sector, even the union, trade union, the transport sectors, look at example, the informal sector in my country. Like, for example, the motorbike sector in my country, the Association of Motorbike Sector is having almost 1.2 million members.
Wow.
Yes, more than even whatever you call any trade union. They have 1.2 million members who use motorcycles in this country. They have a leadership. They have structure that are organized. But what will happen? You realize that as you see this paragraph you are highlighting here, of course, they get some subsidies. So if there are other workers, they might get some subsidies, some housing, some transport subsidies. Government will come with measures, for example, towards election and say that from today henceforth, driving license we have reduced by 50%. You don't need this and this, you see? So the despots have all the powers to play with. They have the advantages of fronting some goodies in your way so that you can support them, you see? Then you realize that they maintain a lot of patronage. Like you see, now look for the story of Mugabe. When they are saying that Mugabe was about to leave, then some people benefit from that, his regime, could not allow him to walk away. Because they know if he goes away, everything else is going down. Now, this is what you are seeing, and I'm really interested to hear what members think about this reading. Basically, it's sharing your mind on what do you think about what is written here. Because we are studying this book, Defeating Dictators, to first of all understand the modus operandi. This chapter 4 is the modus operandi of the dictators, understanding how dictators operate. The question is this actually something you see in your country? Is this something that the author is writing here is something that is true, that's going on? For example, in my country, I'll tell you, the trade union, is the secretary general of the trade union is working with the government. The government will bring the ruling party sometimes back brought the students, what we call the student wing or the student charter of the party. And they celebrated. The tribes who are opposing have now co-opted in government. So your tribe's kingpin or your tribe leader will be appointed in government. And then they create unity about tribal lines. The religious people, like the other day, yesterday, the pastors in my country were in the street demonstrating. Pastors of churches were demonstrating yesterday in the streets. The next day you realize that when the Catholic are saying they're against this or ACK, the Protestants are being brought to State House for some tea, and they drink tea in State House, and they say that they are praying for the government, and they'll be used to sanctify and make that government cleanse the government, so that people say it's a godly government. Now, the despot is playing with everything. In the military and the police, he gives subsidies. That's what we are seeing here. He gives another free subsidy or increment in salary because they have the power even to promise salary for 1 year or fake salary so that you capture some support. Now, that is what is said here. What do you think about that? I'm interested to hear what other people think about this.
Yeah. Can I come on board? Hello?
Yeah, Senator, go ahead.
Hello? Yeah, just
Yes, Senator. Can you hear me?
okay. Thank you. Just to add on what other guys are saying, the dictator actually can actually influence the opposition political party leadership itself. You know what happens when opposition political parties are going for Congress to elect leadership? The dictator can actually finance the weaker candidate so that the weaker candidate can win the Congress, so that the opposition party can be led by someone whom they can manipulate, someone who cannot stand up to challenge the regime, someone who fears for his life. They can do that. Zimbabwe is a typical example where the regime is actually financed very weak leaders in the opposition movement. Right now, Zimbabwe holds a typical example of where the opposition movement is completely destroyed simply because the dictator has actually managed to manipulate the leadership of the opposition. They can do that as well, on top of what has been said already. And where they find the student movement very strong, they can actually form a parallel student movement. They can do that. And they can even infiltrate the labor movement. Like, for example, in Zimbabwe here, there's no labor movement anymore. We know the labor movement used to be very strong in Zimbabwe, but right now, if you look at it, it's so weak. If you go deeper in it, you find that something has happened in the labor movement. The same applies with the teachers' organizations as well. They've been weakened because the dictator has managed to finance or to fund their so-called leaders to take over those movements. So they can weaken it. They can weaken. So it will be very difficult for the people of that particular country to reshape their struggle. However, my recommendations are that the first requirement for the opposition movement to stand up is the unity. While these people seem to have been weakened, it is the leadership that has been weakened, but the people are still ready to fight. The people are so disjointed. They belong to various factions or various groups, but they've got a common outcry. They are all suffering. They all want change. They all want things to happen to change their own country. So what is required among these factions is the unity. They must come together and form a formidable movement which will be able to stand up. But when they form a formidable movement, they must identify a leader who is very courageous, a leader who is going to lead from the front. That's what the people want. They need somebody who is sacrificial, who does not fear death, who does not fear imprisonment, who does not fear any suffering, a person who is dedicated to die for the people of his or her country. That is what is required out of the people. Like if you are in a dictator country where the dictator is in charge, if you do not have a courageous leader, or if you do not have courageous leaders, the dictator will deal with you ruthlessly and mercilessly. Let it be, if you go back, let me give an example of Zimbabwe. The opposition movement started to have punch when the late Morgan Tsvangirai took over. The late Morgan Tsvangirai was the Secretary General of Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions. When he was the SG of the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions, he led from the front. He organized demonstrations. When he then became the leader of the opposition movement in Zimbabwe, he was leading from the front. He was arrested. He was being tortured. He suffered in the hands of the dictator. But because of the persistence and consistency of his brave leadership, the book is actually the Zimbabwe case of 2008 has been taken as an example in the book. Mugabe lost the election. Actually, Mugabe got around 23%, and Morgan Tsvangirai got about 73.8%, which was as a result of mass demonstrations. the opposition leaders organized itself. The party became very strong, such that even the other organizations which were supporting Mugabe, when it came to the election, they all voted for the opposition movement. We know very well that the dictator only controls the leaders, but the masses themselves, they can make their own decision when it comes to the elections. So, in short, let me say, unity of those factional groups of people in a country is required. Identification of a very powerful leader, the woman or a man, who is very courageous to lead from the front, who is very determined to sacrifice his or her life, who is not afraid of being taken to prison, who is not afraid of being tortured, will always be a good leader to fight a dictator. If you use soft methods and soft approaches, a dictator is more cleverer than that kind of techniques. They will not work at all in a dictator. Zimbabwe is a typical example. We used to have a strong man, Mugabe. We resisted him in Zimbabwe. Now we have a cleverer dictator now, who is very manipulative, who has managed to deal with opposition leaders, who has managed to weaken the opposition movement to an extent where today in Zimbabwe, you don't even feel any opposition in this country. So really, from my experience, you need to organize yourself, you need to unite, and you need to have a strong leader who will lead from the front. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. And I think thank you, because hope in your time or tenure of being a senator sometimes back, you are actually experienced whatever we are reading in firsthand. And then what you also see again, as you're saying, even in the unity amongst the opposition forces, as you're saying, the dictator can sometimes manage even to infiltrate that. There's a push in Kenya, for example, I'll tell you, that there are so many forces that have come up to want to replace President Ruto. I'm one of those presidential candidates whom I've actually been observing so many of them making their moves. And they're saying, oh, we need to come and start having a one candidate as early as possible, then we can move forward. That was very patient. Even I told them like 2 days ago, we must understand the tactics of a dictator. As you're saying that we must come together and then agree on who becomes our candidate, united candidate, how sure are we that the person we are going to settle is not a project of the state that has been put in us? In fact, I've asked them and recommended to them that it is 2 years to election. Let anybody willing to contest come out, sell his agenda. Let time reveal who they are. Let people really feel who they are. All the last minute to their ballot, we can be able to make unity and then come together. But if we think that we are going to hurry now and unite and pick one person, how sure are we that this person is not a project? Because the state has everything on their side to play with. They can play with their psychology. They can bring a rich person. They can try to bring a poor person. They can infiltrate, support, and do everything else that they need. They will buy even the people within the system who want to vote that one candidate. And then you end up in another direction. So yes, it's very important that the opposition forces must unite. But as you say, it requires true citizens who are ready to give their life for it. Because the dictators are not pastors. They are not bishops. They are not imams. They are not sheikhs. Are dictators. Let me hear what Sister Tapua has to say, then we go to Brother John. Sister Tapua?
My point is on how blatantly such dictators will come out and admit that they cheated and nothing happens. It's like it's water under the bridge. I'm now in the chair and you can't do anything. And I've seen it has happened in Zimbabwe several times, several elections. And they're now exporting this method of doing things even into Mozambique, our neighbors, where a candidate loses, but they make sure they remain in position and they fight in that position and they manipulate and do all sorts. And I mean, they've even gone to Tanzania. I was so worried because I saw one of the emissaries of Zimbabwe going to Tanzania, and I said, no, these guys are really polluting everyone in the region. My possible suggestion for a solution to this is that if it is embedded within the Constitution, that it's revealed that someone cheated or there was a problem of manipulating elections, then they shouldn't be there. It doesn't matter whether they've been in the seat for a year or so, they shouldn't be there. So that we deter people from doing it the Mugabe style 2008, where they blatantly cheated, where they miscount, misrepresent in people's faces, and people are not able to do anything. Having lived in other countries, the voting methods might also need to change, because in Scotland, in certain level elections, you don't only vote for your best candidate, you rank the candidates. And if the person who's ranked number one achieves less than what it takes to be the leader, so for example, if it's 55%, and the person with the highest is 48, then they go through other permutations. And these permutations should be embedded within the main election so that there's a way of resolving any problems. I also think that the blatant bribery of voters, the last election, where the religious sects, people with using government money to pay people at the end of a church service, they would all get £10 or things like that. It's just wrong. It is. And if an observer comes and says these elections were not fair, they're toothless. All they do is just say it was not fair, and they go, oh, all right, it's our election, we're a sovereign country. And sometimes I've often said, maybe we should have a coup. Because the political parties in Zimbabwe, the dominant political party, has made it an art. We've got a whole graveyard of opposition parties that died because they were infiltrated. As soon as they see a political party emerging, they send people there to support the formation of this political party, to make it fly and have wings and then shoot it down. It's just crazy. It's just so, it's difficult, but we've got to find a way. I was actually saying, maybe if we were borderless Africa, the chances are would be a small territory in the COG, and there would be some element of shame that our governor in Zimbabwe is doing all this, and other people would come in and say no. Because at the moment, the organizations that we have that are supposed to intervene on behalf of the people do not work. So, like one of my brothers was saying, an informed mass, what we need is to educate the people and agitate with the people, so that we are not focused on parties, but we're focused on informing them, giving them information, because people are competent. They're able to make their own decisions for what is good for them. So I think that's where we can start. Just undermine them by education, making sure people know what's going on and know how to read the lie of the land. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Tapua. Brother from Uganda, kindly come in.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I remember about 2 weeks ago, Comrade Pigbin shared that the events of 2022 and 2024 in Kenya were a revolution. Some dismissed the 2002 events, which was presented as the dismantling of the class. The 2024 as an outright revolution when the masses rose up to demand for what belongs to them. Really pertinent in Africa currently is that almost every leader has learned the art of manipulating the very temple of justice. Some tampered with it. Others put age limits, they tampered with it. So, and so many other confusions. And when somebody presented the concept, example, opposition, I think it's also a whole set of complex matter, because opposition in Africa is also not present a sustainable, tangible and sustainable solution to the common man's problems. Now, when you look at the trend in our countries, in our continent, for example, the despots, those in power use divide and rule. As the paragraph clearly put it, that they manipulate dominant political parties, trade unions, associations, to mention but a few, by infiltrating them. And when they infiltrate them, they weaken them. And how do they weaken them? One of the things that we, the citizens, surrendered to those in power is the economy. Once they capture the economy, they have made us vulnerable and useless, and therefore they can hunt us as and when they want at any cost, which is, I can call it at the throwaway price, which is why you see events of leaders, religious leaders, either being bought or divided among themselves. Trade unions, they either create confusion or they buy the powerful ones. Political parties, I think there are very few countries, except South Africa, I think, and some other few countries, which have stable oppositions. The rest, the masses are actually confused whether they are really opposition or they are an extended arm of what? The government, trying to create an illusion that we are opposing their ideology as they always present it. So I think, to me, going forward, what's the most important is that let every common man be educated of what is government, what are your rights and obligations, and how can we demand for what belongs to us, as we also pledge allegiance to the state. Through this, you realize that we can actually have sound systems or institutions in the country. We have had, most of our governments in Africa run on a three-legged approach: the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. But you realize that the executive has infiltrated the other two and rendered them useless. So much so that they use them as tools for rewarding loyalists. Now, when you use these two, which actually are a representative of their masses, because the legislative, for example, consists of people who are elected by the wananchi, the common man down there. Now, once you capture these two, you have killed the soul of the country, and you can actually run it as an entity which you want to run in anywhere. So, I'll start. is there a way that we can build consciousness within the masses so that people know what to do? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Brother Simon. Simon should be coming.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I've been listening. I've heard the passage. I've been listening to members who are putting comments. And this is quite interesting. And sometimes, as Africans, as people, we point where there is no problem to say there is a problem. Then we leave the problem out because we are afraid to say what is the problem, or to point out the real problem that we are having. That's what I've seen. In our African context, in our African structures, in our African values, in our African cultures, we have our norms, we have our values. But the problem when we are talking about the dictators, we are now not looking at the dictator, but we are looking at ourselves. Then we want to point a finger at each other. But the main challenge that we are having is the system which is dictating us, which is the dictator that we are already preparing and carrying generation after generation. We claim to have a constitution, but the constitution is not what we want. It was panel beaten for us to carry it for the interests of those dictators so that they can manipulate any change at any time when they feel and wish to. And when we are talking about opposition in Africa or opposition in our African countries, yes, we have genuine oppositions. Genuine oppositions in Africa, they always manifest, they always win, they always get support from the people. Then we have opposition which are imposed by the dictators outside the country, outside which are the majority, which are what we are having now in most of the African countries, the majority. When I'm saying that the majority is that, remember, in our African culture, whoever feeds you will control you. When you are an opposition party, for example, when we talk opposition party in Zimbabwe, they are funded from outside. Whoever is giving them fund is controlling them and telling them what to do. At the end of the day, they die because this funding is a period. If the fund comes as a 3-year contract or a 3-year period, after that 3 years, there is no funding. If I am now the leader of that opposition, I need money. I have to make sure that I know this fund is only for 3 years. If I don't maximize to take my own share from here, I'm going to go out empty-handed. This is what is happening, this scenario in Zimbabwe for the opposition. And you find they always fight on funding and the funds. And this is where the leadership is crumbled from the opposition because they don't have any source of their own making. They are being extended the hand by those who are extending them, and they control whatever they do. That's the scenario, the very unfortunate part. Yes, we can take example of the first opposition party in Zimbabwe, which was very strong, as one speaker have said, which was led by Morgan Tsvangirai. When you look at that Morgan Tsvangirai's movement, and it was supported or funded by the local people, the workers themselves. So there was nobody who was going to control him or control whatever. So you have the power because you are given the power by the people who want you to be there. But where you are being controlled by the one who fund you, you are given the power by somebody who gives you the money, not the people. At the end of the day, you lose popularity from the people. You cannot win any election. You cannot get the votes because the people, they've seen you are misplaced. The same when we look at other African countries, for example, if you go to South Africa, the oppositions in South Africa, they fund their own. They don't get the funding from any outside people who can feed them and tell them what to do. Yes, they will prefer to lose election because they don't have money. They will prefer not to be elected because they don't have money, but they stand for the people. if I am standing for my group, yes, we have tribes, we have a relative, whatever. If the tribe or the region where I'm coming from, if people are interested in this change and they say, go and stand for us, whether you have money or I don't have money, the people will still stand for me. This is the scenario you look in South Africa with other political parties in South Africa. They are sent there by the people and they still have the backing of those people who send them. They will vote for them, whatever, no matter what happens. This is the scenario you look in South Africa. The whites select who have put their own town in South Africa because they select their people to go and stand for them. They, whatever, if they don't even have one or two, that area, they will win the election because those people, they have sent their people and they fund their only candidates from that people. They don't have anyone outside who funded them. So this is the scenario that when we are in Africa, if we adopt to that, this is the case when we are looking at the current dictator who is outside, like when you are talking about Trump, he freezes all the monies. What happens to African countries who dependent on these NGOs? They crumble and they are crying now. But when you look, for example, when we come to Zimbabwe to give the scenario, when the government, they have foreseen this, they banned all this NGO. When this scenario comes, this did not have any impact because this was already seen and already taken steps to try and reduce their activity and also deal with them before it comes. But even this, if you see today, when there was the war between Israel and Iran, because America felt threatened because they want to make sure his weapons, which are in Israel, are working. They overnight, they went and bombed in Iran, trying to be a very big brother who have all the policies everywhere to try and support everything, which is what is happening. The same what happens with our brother in Burkina Faso. Yes, is the army is not voted in, have come to power, because when we are saying we want the African way, we don't need to do the voting, which with the way we are doing it. Yes, they didn't want him. They have planned all sorts of coups and what, but what did he do? He just denounced the language, the foreign language, the French. The only mistake that he have now done is just to try and nationalize the English, which is another foreign language. That's the mistake that he has now done. And because he have gone to the people, his tribe, his own kinsmen, he get the support, he get the protection. Whoever wants to kill him, he has protection. He is protected and he can move on. Yes, people will call him dictator, people will call him whatever, but the dictator who is outside, who has all the influences, they even continue to try to ask him, when are you going to have elections? Because they want to put their own people. But because he's quiet, because he knows the African way of doing things is not to take the constitution, which is there, which is already polluted with the dictatorship system. The system is what is detecting. So this is why, and you see organs like One Map Africa, we are saying, for us to do away with all this, let's respect each other as brothers and sisters in Africa. Let's find peace among us ourselves and start not to kill each other and accuse each other. Let's try to correct each other so that when we want to oppose each other, I oppose factually. When my brother Pigbeam is wrong in his own way, I should tell him you are wrong. There is no way I have to kill him like what is happening now. Because when somebody is wrong, but you don't have to kill the person because he's wrong, but let him know that he's wrong and can be corrected and they will move forward. The same in our African culture, when we grow up, we know you are not allowed to go and eat from your neighbors. Although we are neighbors, you are told you should eat from your family. But if you go and eat from your neighbors, you are not killed as a child or as a whatever. They have to reprimand you and you continue to go forward. So if you go out and get funding from these outsiders who also dictate what you should do because they've given you funding, you are not killed. You should be reprimanded. So this is the systems that we are having in Africa. And because that is where all the problems are there. This is where in Africa, people, they don't support each other. The same, when you come to scenario in Zimbabwe, is one example of a good country, I will say that in Zimbabwe, because when Robert Mugabe saw that the dictators were outside, they didn't want to do the land distribution. When he said, I didn't want your money, I will do the distribution with my own resources. Nobody funded the land distribution in Africa. And they asked all the foreigners, all the imperialist British people to go out. But the neighbors who were all neighbors, they were very sorry and they blamed him. They all accommodated them. And this is the scenario now in South Africa. When the neighbors refused to accommodate all the whites who are now being asked to move out, it's only Trump who said all the white people should come to America, they have land. But in Africa, people are now realizing that we should support each other so that the dictator is not within us, but is those who are putting the systems and these all things which continue to be perpetuated by some of us when we take up the leadership. When we are in leadership, we forget that when we went to the parliament to sit and discuss, we have a tribe that I'm coming from, we have a constituency that I'm coming from, we have a group of people whose interest I am serving. Then I forget about them, I forget about who is giving me the money. Now I start to serve that person who is giving me the money and his interest. I forget about my people. This is what is happening in Africa, in most African countries. That's why we are losing in our campaigns. That's why we go wrong. Even when we go back to our people sometimes they just turn back on us. They cannot kill us because we are part of the tribe. We are part of them because of our culture, because of how we are, our norms. But they know we have done bad because once we are elected, we don't go back to them. We only go back to them when we need their vote, when it is now voting time. But all this other time, we are enjoying the money from these other people who want us to propel their agendas forward, so that we forget our people and we do it differently. We only go there when we want their vote again to continue to propel the agenda, which is not their people. That's why when you are told about the politics in Zimbabwe, the opposition in Zimbabwe, they died. That's why they died, because they were getting the money from outside. At the end of the day, they fight for the money. When you fight for the money, which is not yours, the one who is holding that money always manipulates you and do whatever you want. And then when you cannot follow, you end up not being there because you don't have the support. When you go to your own people will look at you because you were not looking at them. Then you need their support. They'll say, now, if you need to be supported again to be a leader, reform first before we can give you the support. That's the scenario we have. And this is whatever happened since the time in memoriam in Africa when you are looking at the tribes. Different groups, even when we are looking at our Chimurenga wars in Zimbabwe, the cultural groups, they have their leaders who are traditionally coming up. They were not nominated, they were not voted for, but they lead the people to struggle and also guide the people so that people win all the wars which are happening, even if they were using less weapons, sophisticated weapons, but they won because they have great leaders who are thinkers, whom were not elected, but they only came because of their merits. And they were coming from the people and from different tribes. They subscribe and they sit together and they discuss. This is what is needed in Africa. If borders are removed, we will have those people coming up. Those people will be supported. If we give them the support, we give them our mandate, they work for us, they know that we are the people who have given that. So Africa will go forward, Africa will prosper. This is my take, and this is what I'm saying. The dictator we are talking about is not within us, he's outside us. It's the systems that we are using, which continue to corrupt us and instigate us. Thank you.
Thank you. Your ending is very interesting, that the dictators are not within us. So basically, you're putting your accusation, your blame towards the system. But again, for example, we have just seen recently Traore getting to be a president and remove everything else. So do you want to blame the system, or you blame the leader that maintains the system? Look, for example, in Kenya, Ruto is working to serve, even if the system is oppressive, but Ruto is serving the system to continue dictating on us. But if you get another leader, can transform that. So it's very interesting what you're giving. But Sister Tapua, before I go to you, permit me to go to Sister in South Africa.
Maybe I can just answer on Ruto. before you can come. Yes, Ruto has in the system which he inherited. He has the funding from America. When he comes in, he has the funding. Then he was told that when you go there, do this and this. Then when the Kenyan seen he has just misrepresented them, he realized that following it very easy was not easy for him. But he has the funding that he wanted to pursue and to pocket up. Everybody knows about it. So when that happens, there's still those who gave him funds, they need him to pay up for the funds. And that is the system which is there. Even if you are to come tomorrow and you perpetuate the system, which still dictates you where you can get your pocket fed, you still continue to do the bad, not the people's will. But you will be knowing what the people want. That is exactly what is happening in Kenya. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me just get to South Africa and I will come back to that question. Now look at this paragraph that says that the second element is that no matter how despicable and unpopular despot might be, he still has his support base. It might be 30%, meaning that the overwhelming majority of the people are fed up with him. But if 7 opposition parties challenge him in an election, they divide the opposition, vote among themselves, and each will have 10%. Now, taking in context, there is an election in South Africa where I believe that the revolutionary forces like Malema and the other teams, PAC, will actually work to remove the ANC leadership for that period of time. But see what happened. Then Zuma comes in with his own party, Malema there, and some PAC there, and they divided the votes. At the end of the day, ANC was back to the ruling and the leadership. So let me hear from Sister. What do you think about that?
In our country, things are taking a turn for the worse. In fact, even with Zuma, not everyone did want him in power, unfortunately, but because he had support whilst being the president of the country, then he stayed up until Ramaphosa came in. You know, in our country, Zuma is the first person to have gone to jail for corruption and stuff. And then that didn't make him happy. You almost had what do I call it? I don't have a better word for it. Wherein there was a sort of a war started by those who didn't like how Zuma was treated. So fine, fast forward, like you said, he started his own party, but there are quite interesting issues happening now within his own party. Remember, he took the deputy president from EFF. The deputy president to Malema was taken to MKP to be the secretary there, the SG. So just recently, the SG has been, I wouldn't say expelled because it's still within the party ranks of the MKP. But he was demoted because he visited Bushiri. So according to them, because Bushiri is a wanted man in South Africa, so that wasn't supposed to have happened. So they demoted Floyd Shivambu, and then under the premise that they will be going back to parliament. Unfortunately, it's not on their party list. I mean, on their parliamentary list. So it looks like Shivambu is about to start his own party as I talk to you, but he said he's not resigning from the MKP. So if he's not resigning from the MKP, it will mean he's giving Zuma a taste of his own medicine. Remember, Zuma stayed within the ANC while starting his own party and he wasn't resigning. It's like he had dual membership, something that which was unheard of. And then now it's Floyd doing the same thing because he hasn't resigned from the MKP after being demoted. Today I saw something flying that they want the view of people whether they want him to start his own party or not. There was a link that which was circulating. So talking to this kind of things. So those things are really something else. But that's something that which caught my eye. I'm taking you back. That Mugabe didn't want to stay after losing, but there are those military chiefs that which wanted him to stay. Now I'm asking myself, as a president, or maybe it's because he had lost power. I don't know, but I've been asking myself, how could that be? Because I thought maybe it's the CIC, the commander in chief. So I don't know whether such thing of being now him being dictated upon, it's whether simply because he lost power or what. Because I thought Mugabe, the perception we had about Mugabe is that he was the dictator himself. So he wanted everything for himself. That's the perception we had of Mugabe. Those of us who are not in Zimbabwe. So you touch on that as you. I'm not sure if I've responded to what you wanted to hear about things this side. Thank you.
Thank you. I think thank you very much for raising that question. Yes, you see the mistakes it tends to do, because in South Africa, of course, we were trying to, then we ended up having DA in. But I want to bring Senator Mo in, because Senator might be a bit aware of what happened in South Africa, in Zimbabwe scenario.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let me come in. I just want to respond to what my sister just asked in Zimbabwe. Robert Mugabe was a typical dictator, a very typical dictator from his 1980 years throughout to 2008. Mugabe did not just decide to surrender power. A lot of work was done. The opposition movement was so organized. The opposition movement took action against the regime. In 2008, we did a lot of demonstrations in Zimbabwe. A lot of strategies were put in place. A lot of pressure was put in place, such that the opposition movement convinced nearly everybody in Zimbabwe to vote for Morgan Tsvangirai. It became so humiliating for Mugabe to remain as the president when he got 23%. That's why he had offered to surrender power. In fact, what actually happened is that he sent emissaries to come and see Morgan Tsvangirai to hand over power. An agreement was signed to ensure that people were not going to be victimized, the army was going to be safe, and all sorts of things. The agreement was signed. And Mugabe received it from Morgan Tsvangirai. But it was then the current president, who is now in Zimbabwe now, and some army generals who then said, no, you cannot do that. So they actually put Mugabe under house arrest. Mugabe was then taken under house arrest, and the military then took over and caused a lot of violence in Zimbabwe. A lot of people died. Nearly 500 people were killed by the army and the police and the CIO, and they regained the power. So Mugabe agreed to surrender because a lot of work was done by the opposition to force him. So which therefore means dictators can also be forced wherever they are if the opposition movement is organized. If the opposition movement has got a very serious leader, a leader who is committed to lead from the front, a leader who is organized, a leader who can plan, a leader who works with the people, the dictators can be smashed and they can be destroyed. Yes, some people have been contributing quite positively. For an example, if you go down to Zimbabwe, education is required because Zimbabwean people have been they've been disintegrated. They've been affected by factionalism. They now belong to small groups. They don't realize or know the importance of unity. They need to go through a certain program of education where they need to know the value of unity, the value of working together, to forgive each other, to reconcile, to know the most important thing that they are fighting for are the people of their country. They are not fighting for leaders or individuals. My sister gave gave a very good example of what happened in South Africa. If the oppositions in parties in South Africa were united, they were going to remove the ANC in the previous elections. Because the ANC accepted to go down to 42% in terms of their votes, which means the opposition had the majority of votes against the ANC. It is different from Zimbabwe, where the opposition could win as far as 80% or 70%. But when it comes to counting of the votes, they will give opposition 40% and they give ZANU-PF, for an example, 60%. They would rig from counting the votes themselves. They count the votes and they will tell you different votes altogether. So the rigging in Zimbabwe is very different from what is happening in South Africa. South Africa, they just need to come together, unite their opposition political parties, and go for elections. They can remove the ANC. Dictators, like if you know all countries that went for the liberation war, such as Namibia, Zimbabwe, Angola, Tanzania, Kenya, they got their own systems of retaining power. And they will not want to hand over power to any other political party which didn't fight for the liberation war. So in Southern Africa, that is our challenge. So these particular parties, they actually fund each other. When they go for elections, these 7 political parties that I've mentioned, they would support the ruling party financially. And the army in that particular country would defend their own party. Even if you get voted and you are not united, you give the ruling party an excuse of rigging you. So if you then unite all opposition parties, the ruling party will find no excuse, because where will they give or where will they put the other votes? So these dictators do it deliberately, and they will not want to give you power and or get a hand over power. The other thing that is also that was mentioned by another guy here. Dictators make sure that no local company would support or no local individual will support the opposition political party, because they put up a system like in Zimbabwe. They would monitor every business person or any individual who will support the opposition political party. That person will be harassed. Morgan Tsvangirai was funded by the workers that was in 2000. But from 2006 and going onwards, it was so difficult for him to get the funds because the system had put up networks to monitor whoever was funding the opposition political parties. And they also create unemployment in a country like in Zimbabwe. There's no employment. People are not, they don't earn anything. All people are suffering. So at the end of the day, the opposition would find it very difficult to get the fund from the local people because the system itself monitors everyone and every company or every individual who would want to fund the opposition political party. So it's another challenge that the opposition political parties have in countries where they are dictators. So that's why the opposition political parties will go out then and look for some funders from outside because they have no choice. Because in their own countries, the system is so tight, so much that they will not get a cent. So what is required right now is the way forward, is to unite the opposition political parties, put them through education. They must understand why they are there, mobilize activities on the ground, confront the system on the ground, shake it up, this system that is there. If you do not do those recommendations that I'm putting forward there, you'll be wasting your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
One other thing with opposition political parties in our country, it's like you said, that the ANC being at its 40s there, it should have been easy to like consolidate and then kick it out like that. That won't happen in my view because the opposition political parties still have the white in it, and the white, according to me, they do not want one thing. They want power for themselves. So what they will do continuously is to further divide the black vote to an extent that they themselves find a space to rule again. I think that's where we're going, because you would have a scenario wherein all the political parties, the oppositions, are funded by whites, just to further divide the black vote. That is the reality this side.
Thank you. Let's hear from Namibia as I'm trying to look for something. Now, what is the scenario in Namibia in what you have been discussing? What's going on over there? Yes, Sawindok or Lolo, any of you can come in.
Maybe Lolo should go in first because he has listened maybe from the beginning.
I don't see Lolo on the list of people in the meeting anymore.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe greetings to everybody. I just want to add something small. The previous speaker is right that the opposition parties should unite. But before unification, education is very key, is very critical. Because the opposition parties are going to unite around what? Like in Namibia, we have a situation whereby we just want to take the ruling party out. But what is the alternative? What are we offering as an alternative? I haven't seen this in all the opposition political parties. And most of them are funded by, again, the whites. And if you talk to the elder generation, they are telling you, so we want to bring the white people back. No, if you want to bring the white people back, we will not support you. So what I'm trying to say is the opposition political party lacks a proper ideology to sell to the people. And for so long as they don't do that, the political landscape will be fragmented. So education is key before even the political leaders themselves understand the need for unification. Like the official opposition here in Namibia is IPC. And IPC is advocating for the rule of law. Rule of law, this side, rule of law, that side. But they can't point something specifically in the constitution that says rule of law here is being trampled. Apart from corruption, that's all they are bringing up. Corruption and corruption and corruption. And people are saying we don't eat corruption and we don't eat rule of law. We want to see something tangible on the table that we will eat. So the case in Namibia, it's kind of not easy to convince. And mind you, most political parties are splinter groups from the already existing political parties. So to say, speaking under correction, but that's my observation, all these people that are starting political parties are just after power. Because in Swapo, he could not be given this position and he did not become the governor and he did not do this. So I'll rather go and start a political party and I'll go to parliament and I'm a boss of my own. So it's not really, my observation is it's not really that we want to advocate a certain political point. It's more about power hunger and bitterness, and some of them are fired from this party and all these type of things. So I don't know whether I'm making sense. I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Windhoek. You are raising something I'm trying to look at on the unity of opposition forces, because we are, I think, Senator Morgan had even said here that even the government can bring their person to be in that opposition. And then that person can still win that opposition ticket you want if you're elected. And the person will still go in the ballot to face their same sponsor. You see? So there's a lot that we need to learn. And I think there's something I was highlighting before on the type of election we have. The president is the one who appoints the election commission. He's the one who dispatches the police officers to distribute the ballot boxes. He's the one who employs person who will announce that results. And then they ask you, do you expect them to actually to remove themselves from power? But there's this quote I wanted to put here. Yes, I think it's here now with me. Let me highlight it. I've just gone back to this, and it speaks to what Sir Windhoek is trying to say here. And it says, opposition political parties are not well organized and offer few valuable alternatives. As such, there are few intermediaries between high politics and the people. And the press that might play that role relies on the patronage of the state or powerful businesses cliques with their own agenda. This is just part of what I wanted to highlight to. But yes, I see Sister Tapo want to come in. Sister Tapo first, then we go to Simon.
Thank you. I've got a few comments to make because I think we're missing the point that dictators are by their very nature manipulative. So we could come up and say we need opposition parties to unite. But they are uniting in an environment not of their making. Will the dictators stand by the side and let these guys unite? Really? So, when I think there was a comment about Zimbabwe and it not being affected by what Trump had done in terms of withdrawing funding. A bill had been passed in Zimbabwe, which was seen by other people as a way of controlling what the NGOs were doing. Because in Zimbabwe, after the decimation of political opposition, the NGOs started playing a role in terms of information dissemination and education of the people and looking after people's health and gender issues. And because in some instances, it was exposing the failures of government, there was a perception that this new law was passed to control that. And then to then turn around and say, Zimbabwe has not been affected by Trump's position, I think is misleading. Because shock horror, people got to know that is it 220,000 nurses or a ridiculous amount of nurses was sponsored by USAID. And yet we've got a government that was saying opposition is getting funded by foreigners, this, that, and the other. And yet they're hiding behind their fingers. So what I'm saying is, when we're dealing with dictators, we're dealing with a clever bunch that will try to mitigate against any of the things that we're suggesting. So you will find when we're trying to get the ordinary person in the street informed, we've got to form some kind of organization to inform the people. The government is not going to inform. So we're getting into the realm of NGOs. And if I form an NGO that is supposed to form clubs and organize, I know in Zimbabwe, you can't even donate a box of books without going through the political party. I know, for example, that people donated things during COVID from Australia and around the world, and it had to get the main party's permission to land where it was supposed to, and it is accompanied by the sitting person in that constituency. So we cannot therefore say funding is what causes dictators or what weakens oppositions. I
Having lived in other countries where opposition is opposition, opposition is seen as part of one coin, the other side of a coin. You cannot operate a system without opposites, dialectics. But in Africa, we want a system where it's my way. But you actually acknowledge that it cannot be your way only. That's why they then form these pseudo-political opposition parties. My conclusion is this type of system, the democratic type of system whose origins is the West, does not suit us at all. Because, for example, we tend to view opposition as the devil, an enemy. I have people who could not get food aid in a village because they just happen to hold a different point of view. And you know that if you hold a different point of view, you go hungry. Therefore, you go and buy the political card, membership card, that will put food on your table. And if this is what we're calling democracy, and if this is what we're calling, what we're trying to work with in order to come up with a fair African form of government that looks after everybody, whether you have the same perception or different perceptions, this system does not work for us. Because when we say, for example, right, this thing is right, that one is wrong, they should apologize, this, that, and the other. For my position, for how I see things, since when has the world's perception been unitary? We all see things differently. And things work better when we see things differently and when we discuss amicably. The problem is we're failing to see who our enemy is. Whilst we're busy squabbling with each other, resources are going out. Whilst you're standing up to say, guys, we should try and find a fair market to sell our resources. Some of us are shipping soil, evil, to other countries because this is my chance and I have to make do. So it's that colonial mentality, that mentality that says, I myself, there is no Ubuntu here. We are failing to be the Africans that we should be, who look after our own, who look after ourselves, who look after the lowest person in our community. And if we work at getting people to understand that, despite the dictators, then we will get somewhere. But it's a hard slog because there are people out there who want us to fail. Because it is in this chaos and this failure that they thrive. One last point. What turned China around for me in terms of attitude was their coming to the realization that they call it their century of shame, where the Chinese were beaten by the Japanese. Because if we fail to say, for example, we are living in a period of shame for Africa, shame on our men, shame on our women, shame on ourselves, because it's only when you feel that shame, you start saying, we've got to change this. But if we are saying, oh, Zimbabwe is doing very well, they've got the land reform in hand, they've gotten back their land, and we're beating our chests, we are not being truthful because we still have the reserves that were established by Ian Smith. Our people do not have land. They're in reserves that can be taken over anytime by the government. And we've got an institution like that. And then you hear people from all over the world, particularly Black Africa, saying Zimbabweans did very well. Robert Mugabe did really well. But right now, no one talks of people getting dispossessed from their land, being moved. We pretend things are okay. Let's come back and say, we're shaming, our men are shaming us. If they know they're being shameful, then maybe they'll be able to change. I think it's an attitude thing. I think it's a mental thing. We need to stop acting like we've got it in control, but we don't have it. We absolutely don't have it. Sorry to say. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. I've just highlighted some of the characteristics of a dictatorial regime. I know we've talked about it extensively. So things like unyielding grip on power, political repression, intellectual repression, brutal tactics, flagrant violation of human rights, all this you have seen them. This is them. In this particular chapter, we are studying their mode of operation. In the next chapter, we'll start studying the tactics to counter their mode. And that's why I've been going back to check on this. So ours is just basically to look at this mode of operation by dictators, really what is going on and what you see all over. And if you see something like this, it should show you that this is an evidence of a despotic regime. So for you to know whether your regime is despotic, just look at those characteristics and you'll be having answer with you. But let me hear what Sir Windhoek and then Sir Simon Chibi has to say. Sir Windhoek?
Yes, thank you again. You see, one key issue that we also take lightly in unseating dictators is the handicap of, I know it has been said already, access to funds. Opposition parties do not have funds to campaign to bring awareness to their respective communities. The people who are funded are those people who are funded through CIA agencies when they want to bring regime change in favor of the whites, in favor of the white supremacists. But if you have got a point to advocate Ubuntu, Pan-Africanism, communalism, and these things, nobody will come to your aid. So I would have loved a situation whereby a Pan-Africanist organization or a Pan-Africanist NGO is formed to help fund opposition parties that are gravitating in those directions of Pan-Africanism, African unification, African development, Ubuntu, one for all and all for one. In the absence of that, like we have seen the case in Zimbabwe, where all funders are being monitored and they are being harassed. So when are we going to bring that change without finances? So it's up to us Africans, I don't know through which organ. AU is another lame duck. So we have to model something that will be financing credible opposition parties. For instance, if you see a situation in Namibia you have assessed, and you see that opposition parties are enough to garner majority, then they will be funded, provided they will be advocating and implementing the objectives of Pan-Africanism, conscientism, and the like. Thank you.
No, Sir Windhoek, you've raised something very important. Very important. Because you see, political parties, presidents, and systems you operate on were created by the West, funded by the West, supported by the West.
Maintained
The despots
by the West.
In the West. So the president we have some good pockets from there. The system gets some good packaging and parties and those who have some support. And I think is a call out.
Brother Pigeon, I'm kind of losing you. I don't know about the rest.
Yeah, we're losing him.
Okay. Please check your connectivity.
Can you hear me?
Check your
You're
connectivity.
breaking.
I'm breaking. Okay.
Yes.
Let me work on that. Are you be able to hear me? You can't still hear me. Okay. I'll allow other members to go and share that. So yeah. Go ahead.
Is that a poor?
Yes.
Did I also lose you?
Not really. I thought I could hear you.
Oh, okay. Maybe Brother Pigeon will come back.
Yeah.
No, Sister Tapua, can you?
Almost.
I want
I just heard my name and nothing else.
Okay, I'll put something in the chat. So please, Sister Tapua, go ahead
all
and
right.
share your thinking. I don't know.
Just to share, I think whilst we're waiting, an example of when we say opposition parties are not well organized. How well organized does an opposition party have to be to root out infiltration? What does it take? Because it almost feels like for opposition to survive, it's got to outflank the main parties because they're able to infiltrate in insidious ways. Because we've seen how, for example, in Zimbabwe, the one of the current parties was actually, overtaken by a creation of the main ruling party, and there was just chaos, and we couldn't believe what was happening. So how does one mitigate against such?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's a good question. Sister Tapua,
Yes.
is a good question. And also to add to that, we must not downplay it that the ruling parties that we would call dictators are funded on their own way by both sides because they are usually friends to both sides. Friends to the West and friends to China and Russia. So, like the saying go, it's better to stay with the devil that I know than the angel I don't know. So while you are trying to oust these dictators, it's difficult because they have really built very thick shields around them. And to penetrate, nobody will be happy. So it's difficult. So hence your question, how well organized should oppositions be? Opposition, they don't need a certain degree of organization. Organization itself is a very subjective term. So for as long as you are organized, you are organized. That's my view. So the only problem why you would look disorganized is because you are surrounded by systems that do not want you to penetrate their territories. I hope I'm making sense. Thank you.
Hello, can you?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. You see, there's a lot of things are being said here. Like, look, for example, this paragraph. This paragraph says that
It's the newborn that is. The new guy is messing up with your connectivity.
Maybe they're trying to do that.
Maybe your system is bugged, you know?
Looks like. We are appearing not well organized.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
That's how they penetrate your system.
Mm-hmm. You know, I'm talking about this because I was thinking about Traore. Because the way Traore came into power, he outflanked people. He wasn't obvious who would come into power.
Yeah.
And because he outflanked people, and we are fortunate because he's got an ideology that matches with what the leadership that we want. We are fortunate in Traore that way. Because imagine if Traore had tried to form a political party.
Yeah. Who would have voted for him?
Not just voted for him, who would have let him form the party?
Yes.
I mean, starting with the finances. We've got Pigbins telling us how expensive it is to register a political party or to want to be in position. And then when they get to know what your ideological position is, then they strategize against you. Yes, this is why I'm saying we need another system. This one doesn't work for us. I mean, the way we have manipulated this democratic system, I think even the Europeans wonder what it is we're doing. Because it's far from what they do. Crazy.
Yeah. So you having said that, we want to work along avenues that we haven't understood. Our modus operandi is not suitable for reaching those were designed to yield a specific results against which we are trying to work. How would you implement that formula to reach your objectives? It's like
I'm putting in a borderless Africa because dictators want territories that they can manipulate and manage. But to manipulate and manage 50, how many states are we? 53, 54 states?
54.
Is near impossible. So, for example, the Trumps could not work out. And they really have to work hard.
We don't even know. We want to.
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hope you can still hear me. Sister Tapua, I'm liking the direction you're taking this. I know you are stance against either having a continental government and removing the borders. But again, we have identified that the biggest tool towards defeating dictators is working on the mind of the citizens, what you are calling civic education.
Yes.
Now, don't you see a united Africa being our 40 million or 1 billion of people whose minds are still captive, which means the bigger even we become as a continent, the bigger is the task to liberate the minds. Because basically, you will still have the same percentage of people whose minds are not liberated. So I don't think that even having a continental scale leadership can still reduce the chances of people making wrong choices. The concern is the same. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. What will happen is, whilst in a country like Zimbabwe, with about 15 to 20 million, I don't know what our actual population is, and a few tribal groups, we're going to move in new territories because we're going to cease to operate in tribal groups, and we're going to try and find our thought as a country whilst we're seeking representation for our countries or our subgroups or our regions. That opens up a new way of thinking. And in finding a new way of thinking, you then open up room to educate people in a way that does not have an obvious pre-colonial or colonial stamp mindset to it. Because I think that's really important. Because whilst we might want to have a new start, we can never quite have a new start. But if we have a new state, the African state, borderless, then you get so much activity. Even the Mnangagwas and the Zumas and the whoever else of this world will have to work out new challenges. And when people have an opportunity to trade across borders, to grow, then you get a better chance. Then we're having a possibility of growth, because then we're actually fired up as a people. Because right now, operating in this village and this chaos where someone has worked out how to manipulate this part of the world called Zimbabwe is not going to work. I think we need a new map. One map Africa and new leaders. Thank you.
Brother Begin.
Yes, comrades, I think our time is up. Sawindo,
Brother
what do you want to say,
Begin.
please?
One last comment. One last comment. It looks like unification of Africa is almost not feasible because we are dealing with the minds of the people. We are lacking the resources for civic education and all these things. So I will put the cart before the horses, and I will say the best way to fast track unification is the way of Traore, and then you start implementing, and you play with the people's mind along those lines, and people will start following. To wait to educate the people first, to wait for fundings first, that will take forever.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you.
Can I comment before you close?
Yeah, please.
I'm sure if you go back to why we are behaving like this, it is actually important to look at the global challenge that Africa was divided into these small states by the Western world through the scramble of Africa. Then they introduced the term democracy to us after the liberation war of Africa. But I want to agree with the Madam Speaker that democracy that we are enjoying in Africa To me, I call it a sweet laced with poison. You think you are enjoying the sweetness of the sweet, yet you don't know that behind that sweet there's poison. You take it, you die. So it is actually very important for Africans to go back to Afrocentric systems, develop Afrocentric systems that are embedded in their own culture, identity, and originality. Something which is unique to the Western style. We are not going to achieve what we want to achieve in Africa because the systems that we are following were designed from outside, from a Western culture, Western identity, and Western originality. They understand it better than us here in Africa. So if we are to really achieve change or really to achieve what we want to achieve, we must go back to our own roots as well, our own culture and our own African identity. If you carry out research, our cultures are almost the same across the entire Africa. All Black people have been living in the similar ways, such that if we then go there and really understand what governance should we develop, an Afrocentric governance system, just like, let me give you an example, just like the Chinese. The Chinese developed their own system. You can call it whatever I want to call it, because we were told by the Western world that it is a bad system, but they've developed a system which ensures growth and development, economically, peace and order in their own country. And they've managed to develop their own country from nothing. You know, China was one of the most poorest countries in the world, but today we are looking at it, it's one of the richest countries in the world, because there are three elements that I've studied in China. That they have got unity of purpose as Chinese. They got peace in China. They got shared vision. So if you develop a governance system that caters for those three, you can achieve a lot of things. Africa today, we need unity, we need peace, we need shared vision. Even at local level in Zimbabwe, if we are to achieve the Zimbabwean economy to grow, you need unity, you need peace, you need shared vision. So we need to look at Afrocentric systems of governance, which are to do with us, the one that you understand, the way you understand your language. It's easy to speak in your language than speak in English. It's, you know, when you talk up you speak in your language, you feel free, your mind works well, and you can design, you can think, and we need to realize that. So at the moment, we are really we are captured, we are still enslaved, because the outside world, mainly the Western world, runs us, runs our minds, sets agendas for us, set everything is set from us. The standards are Western set. Is it what we should do? Can't we set our own standards? Can't we set our own agenda? Can't we design Africa the way we want? We've got natural resources, we've got water, we've got forests, we've got mountains, everything is with us. But why are we trailing to the Western world? Why do we remain under the captive of slavery? Why do we remain under the captive of the colonialism? And today we are under the captive of the so-called democracy. Are these the right things that we must follow? Let us go back and think and see what we can do to make sure that Africa can be our own country, and we can be able to make use of our own natural resources for our own benefit. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you once again. And it's a pleasure to have you with us, of course. And yeah, I know you are working on the Morgan Tsvangirai's party to revive it. Is it that the case?
It's correct. And my agenda is very clear. I'm saying all opposition movement, stop pointing fingers at each other. We are a victim of the system that is there in Zimbabwe. We are a victim of failure to learn how our Morgan Tsvangirai led the opposition for 18 years. He sailed through the West dictator against opposition for 18 years. He had no money, I know it. He was my personal friend. He had no money, I know it. The party was running without a cent at all. But he fought the system for 18 years, unapologetically, and he succeeded. And what was he doing that we can't do today? Why are we crying about it? So and so, so and so, so and so? Some things are amiss, which we need to look at. So I'm saying, let us revive the opposition movement through unity, through education. We need to educate each other. Why are we fighting? How should we fight? We need that kind of a thing. Otherwise, if we do not educate each other today, we remain in these fragmented political parties, and we always cry, so and so has been bought, so and so has got the money, so and so doesn't have the money, and at the end of the day, the people of Zimbabwe are the victims. We must come together today. But I'm calling for, my agenda as the interim leader of the MT Shangirai Party is to call for unity. So what I've done right now, I've approached all senior leaders that you know in Zimbabwe, all of them. They know I've knocked at their doors, and I've told them, you, let us unite. You, let us unite. The moment you unite, you reduce the chance of a dictator. The dictator would have no in playground to manipulate you. Because through unity, you are also grouping yourself. Because you know your number in terms of opposition, you are more than the ruling party. But if you fragment yourself, you are opening up for more manipulation by the dictator. Don't make it easy for the dictator. Make it hard. Let him or her manipulate, but make it difficult for him. And you can do it by uniting the opposition movement, educating the people, confronting the regime head on, challenging the regime head on, in parliament, in councils, on the streets, everywhere. Make it difficult. Make it difficult for the regime. Don't make it easy for until it breaks down. The dictator can break down under the forces of the people of that country. If you do not organize yourself, the dictator will continue to enjoy themselves, they continue to manipulate, they continue to do whatever they want, but make it difficult for them by organizing yourself, uniting, confront them, demand on the street, in parliament, in council, and everywhere. Thank you.
Senator, we need to compare notes.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator. And unlike friends in Zimbabwe, like Sister Tapua and Brother Simon, to get in touch as you build some forces together. I met Senator in Kenya. I think he came over in Nairobi and we talked a lot about this. So thank you for coming in and what you're doing over there. I'm trying my best in this other side of the country, Kenya. Sawindok is also trying with a party in the other side of Namibia. And yeah, we are trying to do our best so that you can move on. Before we end this, Devin is here for long. Devin, before we close it, maybe I give you even some minute to say something, because it will be no right for you to, I know you've been sharing on the chat, but please have some minute to share something with us before we come to an end of this. Devin, if it's not able, then we'll probably be coming to an end of this.
Hello, sorry, Chairman. I didn't hear you there. In fact, I don't have much to contribute on this one, except to support the idea that we should go the Afrocentric way, because in the Afrocentric way, that's where our solutions lie. We are trying to fit into a democratic system that doesn't conform to our African ways of doing things, especially even in governance itself. Africans, we have our own way, because we all don't want to be leaders, but we need a leader who lead according to what we want. Like, for example, Traore, in this case, his leadership and his values is in line with the most or the majority of Africans. That is what we need. We don't want to fight him to be at his position, but what we can do is to support him. So now, to get to that point, that's where we are finding it difficult, because we are now struggling with democracy, and yet we are not fit for democracy. We are Africans. We need to find our African way and bring our African solutions to the table. That's all I can say for now.
Thank you. As we bring this to an end, comrades, remember we read it some times back that absence of election is not absence of democracy. The fact that people say that we have to do away with democracy, conscientious is democracy. Our African tradition use conscientious. People agree in consensus that, okay, this is the person who's going to do this. The World Trade Organization up to date do not vote. They agree on consensus. And our African society still agreed on consensus. Let's agree this person going in. So the absence of one form of democracy is not the absence of democracy. A democracy that is defined that must be through voting and electing popular person is not the only democracy. Agreeing on consensus of a community, putting together, because in African setups, as most of you are saying, we were not in competition. We were in agreement, agreeing what we want to do for the best interest. It's not about who is the best amongst us. And that's when we agree on concessions. And some concessions is not absence of democracy. So thank you very much for this. We'll continue in our next class to read. This chapter 4 is modus operandi of dictators. We are reading the tactics of dictators, understanding the tactics of dictators. Chapter 5 will be starting to read on how we counter the tactics, and chapter 6 will be the strategy laid to defeat despotism, because despotism is an enemy of all of us. So thank you very much for this time, and let's meet again next Sunday. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Bye.